Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis tonight. So we're going to start over in Israel with a very bold move by the IDF that is escalating tensions in the Middle East. And this headline coming from CBS: killings of Hamas leader in Iran and Hezbollah commander in Beirut fuels fear that the Israel-Gaza war will spread. So let's bring in our power panel to discuss. We have Ron Coleman, who is an attorney and the host of the Coleman Nation podcast. We have Matt Tyrmand, who's the head of V24 Investigations, and Auron Macintyre, who is a writer at The Blaze. So, Matt, let's start with you. This is a pretty aggressive move by Israel, and it's coming just a week after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed Congress here in the United States. Anthony Blinken was suggesting last week that there wouldn't be this type of aggressive move. So, does this perhaps widen, as some outlets are suggesting, the Middle East conflict?
Well, thankfully, the Israelis do not go to the Biden administration and Anthony Blinken for a affirmative or negative on what they should do next in defending their sovereignty and defending their own population. The catalyst here on escalation was Hezbollah and that bombing that killed a dozen kids in northern Israel a couple days ago. Escalation, it's been escalating since October 7th, and this was not catalyzed by Israeli action. It was catalyzed by Islamo-fascist terrorist actions and proxies of Iran in Hezbollah, with Hamas in Gaza, with the Palestinian Authority doing nothing, talking out of both sides of their mouth and saying, yeah, well, we're not partaking in this, but also still pay to slay and allocating funds to those who mass murder or suicide bomb. So Israel's doing, as I've said on the show with you many times, Israel's doing what it's going to do, as it should, to protect its sovereignty, its people, life in general, and from the horde of Islamo-fascists in that region. And thank God for them. We all pray for their success, because Western civilizational values hang in that balance.
Yeah, and that's a great jumping off point for Auron Macintyre to enter the conversation, in terms of Western civilization. And we've seen, a lot of, global politics that have really not been advocates for Israel defending its sovereignty, or really any nation defending its own sovereignty. And so, where do you see some of the fault lines here in terms of the media's response being so anti-Israel and really trying to paint this as Israel being the aggressor, which is just factually incorrect?
Well, obviously, the left and particularly the media have shifted into this frame of colonization. For a long time, Israel seemed to have a bit of the unprincipled exception when it came to its ability to avoid this left-wing bromide. But now it has been applied, and Israel has been brought into the family of Western nations that are evil and horrible because they are the colonizers, they are the oppressors. Ultimately, as Matthew pointed out, Israel is a sovereign nation, so I'm more than fine with them doing what they need to do to protect themselves as they see fit. But just as they do not ask the United States or Joe Biden what they're going to do before they do it to protect their nation, I would simply ask that we, as the United States, not be asked to be pulled into any conflict that is created by their actions. The United States might say, yes, you as a nation that perhaps shares some of our values has the right to defend yourself. We lend you that, we support that, but we do not want to be directly involved. We do not want to be involved in giving you funding. We don't want to be involved in any conflict that might be created by this. And I think that's the message that needs to be consistently brought forward to a country that is making its own choices geopolitically.
Ron Coleman, do you agree with that? I mean, there are some U.S. interests here in terms of, Americans that were captured and are still being held hostage. I mean, the United States, I think, does have a stake in this. So do you agree with Auron's assessment here?
No, Auron hit it right on the nail, hit the nail right on the head. The United States hasn't done anything to get its own hostages out of the hands of Hamas. It has essentially defaulted and failed to show up. It doesn't really have any moral capacity here to say, yeah, hey, watch out for our people. There's been no pressure, no meaningful pressure by the United States on Hamas. On the contrary, all the pressure has been placed on Israel, notwithstanding that Israel receives weapons from the United States. Hamas has not been victimized by the United States, has not been attacked by the United States, has not been threatened by the United States. The hostages in Hamas's hands, if indeed they're alive, have never been mentioned. They're not part of this administration's focus at all. Yes, American interests are always implicated, but as Auron pointed out, The United States is a sovereign country. It should and must do what is in its national interests when they coincide with those of an ally. That's fantastic. When they don't, then the chips have to fall where they may.
And so, Matt, where does the conflict go from here? Because this does appear to be escalating, and now with Iran potentially entering the picture. I mean, do you think that they're going to be put off by this clear display of power from Israel, or are we going to see some of these overtures from Turkey threatening to invade Israel, bringing in even more countries? Where do you think that this goes from here, especially in an election year where now the current sitting president of the United States is clearly the lamest of lame ducks?
Sure, a lot to unpack there. First, Iran has its own internal political strife and upheaval with the plane crash of the president. I personally believe that was a inside job to replace a potential next supreme leader in the succession with the chosen supreme leader's son. So I thought the fix was in there. Look, the fact that Israel could go to Tehran, just like they can go to Beirut and flex and take out high-ranking heavies in these, malefactors complexes. We're coming up on the one-year anniversary of October 7th. I think that Israel will escalate in these formats. Look, there's a catalyst here. You have the Hezbollah attack in northern Israel 4 days ago, 4 days ago. But coming on the one-year anniversary of October 7th, I think that they should do all they can to clean this mess up. They've got the military capacity. They've got the moral clarity. And who cares what the Biden-Harris administration thinks? As you pointed out, Biden is lame duck. The only thing that this administration has done in Gaza is build ineffectual piers to give aid that did not work. They've actually helped Hamas and did everything they could to tie Israel's hands behind its back under the threat of reduced aid or weapon transfers, things like that. When it comes to Turkey, Turkey is just doing what Turkey does. It's a NATO member. It is not going to do anything that would put that at risk. It is internal saber rattling for the Middle Eastern cohort that Erdogan, who is weaker than ever, needs to kind of regalvanize in support of his own strength internally.
And Auron, what are your thoughts on the escalation and the overall conflict? I mean, as Matt mentioned, we're coming up on the anniversary of October 7th pretty soon.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear that ultimately this is going to be a blood feud that is going to go on for a very long time. The Palestinians are uninterested in being governed by the Israelis. They want their own state. Whether you think that's a good decision or not, that's ultimately the goal that they have. I don't think Israel wants that. I think they understand that that would put themselves in a great security risk. And so they're going to continue to make sure that they have a heavy hand involved in any organization inside Palestinian territories. This is just a situation where neither side is going to be happy with the other. They all have a very long history of hating each other and having brutal violence done to them. And I don't think any of that is going to change anytime soon. The best thing possible, of course, would be a swift end one way or another to this conflict. But unfortunately, due to the geopolitical ties of so many in the area, we're never probably going to see that. And we're going to keep seeing this game of inches grinding down with an ineffectual game from probably both sides for a long time.
So, Ron Coleman, let's talk about the United States in this and the upcoming election. I mean, I thought President Trump made a very strong statement from his nomination acceptance speech at the RNC convention, where he specifically said that the hostages, all the hostages, not just American citizens, need to be returned before he takes office again. And that was clearly a directive. But I don't see the Trump campaign actually harnessing a lot of the energy around any sort of foreign policy talking points. I mean, even pointing out to the Abrahamic Accords and, some of these things that clearly world stability just honestly was better when Donald Trump was in office. Do you think that the Trump campaign needs to step that up?
It's an interesting strategic question. It seems to me that they are absolutely letting the Democrats occupy the space right now. It may very well be that although everyone has his view of what the Republicans ought to be doing, that they want the Democratic infighting and incoherence to be the focus now. It also is possible that there's a little bit of infighting and a certain amount of back and forth on the Republican side, and that they probably don't really have their message together. one thing does seem very clear. It's only July.
Only. Oh, I know. You're reminding me we have so long to go. I'm so ready for all of these unprecedented times to be over with. But, Matt, your take on the GOP's messaging on this?
There's a small cohort within the GOP, or we won't even say the Republican Party per se, but the right that is totally Ron Paul on steroids, Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, no interventionism whatsoever, let the world burn around us, Monroe Doctrine. Anytime that vacuum that gets created by non-interventionism, power pours a vacuum globally, especially in the last 100 years with the Pax Americana, whether you like it or not, that's the reality. Anytime that accelerates, the GOP weakens, it gets less support from independents and moderates who do believe that America is on the margins a force for good. If, there's a debate on expansionism, I think we all agree the adventurism of 2003, 4, 5, Iraq, Afghanistan was a sore misstep in American foreign policy. It was too much, too fast, too far. But you don't want the opposite to take over the GOP. And so the GOP has been trying to thread the needle, giving credit too much to too many of these extreme non-interventionists that don't have a sense of balance. And I think that they're, they need to be a little bit.
We'll have to leave it there, but we'll be back with the political panel to talk.